Last week, I got to go to New York City and go and check out the new Apple iPad M4 and just get a first look at this new product. Okay, good morning from New York. I am here to check out the new lineup of the Apple iPads. I think personally, I know they have the Apple iPad Air and the Apple iPad Pro. I'm more interested in the Pro. They announced the M4 chip yesterday at the keynote, and I think what's really exciting for me, other than the fact that they jumped from M2 to M4, is that for my workflow, I'm moving from an M1 MacBook Pro, trying to move into lighter and faster systems. I think this has the potential to be something that is integrated into my workflow very heavily, especially considering that there is the new Apple Pencil, which has a lot of haptic feedback with the dual OLED and the new processing power. I think this has the potential to be a very powerful editing machine or a content creation machine. I guess we'll see. Few considerations before watching this is that I've had the iPad Pro for the last 2 days, so I haven't had a lot of time to really explore with it. I'm primarily a DaVinci Resolve user, not a Final Cut user, but we will be touching base about Final Cut on the iPad. So some of the bigger news for a lot of Final Cut users is you now have the ability to edit off of an SSD or a hard drive from your iPad, which is the first time that we're seeing this, although DaVinci Resolve has had the ability to do this for some time. Now, I've been told that Final Cut users can go back and forth between Final Cut and their desktop computer, so I think this is a great chance to kind of get your first rough cut or story cut, which is usually essential to your content process, and then you kind of take it over to the line on your desktop. My only consideration there is that if you are just trying to streamline your process where you're working on a single system and not multiple systems, it seems a little counterintuitive to only have a certain amount of features available on one system, but then you might want to take it over the line on another system. From my understanding, a lot of the third-party plugins that you might have purchased for Final Cut won't be transferable over to the iPad version. So that being said, if this was a deal breaker in the past that you couldn't work off of a hard drive, I think for a lot of Final Cut users, this is going to spark some interest to explore this. Now, before we talk about performance, I think it's always good to consider the workflow of a new device. Now, since we only have one port that can transfer files, you'll need to get a dongle, which has the ability to have an SD card reader, and you can connect your SSD. Now, it's pretty easy. You just go into Files, copy and paste, and you can do data management on your iPad. But the consideration here is that you have one more step. Once the files are done transferring, then you can disconnect the dongle and your SSD and then just plug your SSD in. So it's one more step in exchange for the ability to use the Apple Pencil Pro and the interface of having an iPad versus just being able to do this on your computer. What I think would actually make this a lot more appealing is that if we had an SSD that had a card reader built into it. So that product doesn't exist. If there's anybody out there that wants to make that product and do a little collab together, I think that would make the iPad a lot more enticing. I don't think this is a deal breaker for a lot of people. It's not a deal breaker for me per se, but it is just an extra step to consider in terms of your workflow that could get annoying over time because it's another thing that you have to carry. Where I think this is a huge win for Apple is that if there are any users that are using the ProRes write to an SSD off of their iPhone, then you can just disconnect it and plug it right into your iPad to start editing in DaVinci or Final Cut. So you're taking out that data transfer. That being said, not everyone is shooting on iPhone these days. So if you are an Apple only person, great, that's a huge win. But if you're using other cameras like a lot of content creators are, the different tools of the trade, this is just the other step to consider. Now, I think for a lot of people, the tandem OLED was one of the standout features of the new M4 iPad. I mean, seeing it in person, the edge to edge, the blacks basically blended perfectly right into the edge, the black edge of the iPad. It is very impressive. Plus the 1000 nits, it is a stunning display. So I could see a lot of benefits to people who are colorists that want to have a secondary monitor or reference monitor, either for their client or while they're color grading. I also do want to note that luckily you can also charge your iPad at the same time if you have the Magic Keyboard. There is a USB port there, but you can't use that to transfer files. So you'll have to stick to having your SSD connected to your iPad through the one port and then being able to charge through the other area. Now, just kind of speaking candidly, this did feel a little bit like a missed opportunity for longer battery life. Now, although we do have this amazing 5.3 millimeter iPad Pro, I mean, look, everyone commented on the fact that the pencil is actually thicker than the iPad itself. I mean, this is amazing that we have this technology in our hands these days. But I'd rather have more battery life in a slightly thicker product than having that thin product, but it's the same battery life as the old one. It's also nice that you can connect the iPad to an external monitor so that you have another one to edit off of should you be editing at home rather than on the go. Now, I can't speak to the performance of the editing on the iPad because I don't have access to Final Cut, and I cannot confirm if DaVinci Resolve is actually utilizing the M4 chip. When all of that is confirmed, I will be doing a longer form video. So if you have some questions or you have things that you want me to test within that video, please drop them in the comment section. Okay, so moving back to what I saw in New York for Final Cut Pro. Specifically live drawing using the Apple Pencil Pro. Super impressive. The first time I've actually seen this. I know that it's been on Final Cut Pro for some time, but this is now taking advantage of the Pro Pencil with all of the built-in effects. I think a lot of people kind of consider this a bit of a gimmick and that it all will look the same. Everyone's videos will look the same from drawing on it. I actually have the opposite opinion. I think this is your chance to have your own unique fingerprint on your videos. I've wanted to be able to do this for a long time. Now that it is all integrated into a single app, I really want to test this out because I think this will actually make my videos stand out more. Plus, I'll be able to add more information in the way that I want to. Like most apps, we're seeing a lot of AI features coming out. We have scene removal, or basically rotoscoping. The example that they were showing there is that there was this dancer, they have the text, and they're like, let's have the dancer dance in front of the text. So they just go over, they find the effect, they drag it on, and instantly, because of the M4 chip, it just works right away. Super impressive. It looked amazing. But I also know that they had like the exact perfect example where it was high contrast. But I think where we'll really see if this is working well is in more complex scenarios. I think if you are someone that wants to utilize this feature, you'll have to kind of be in your world, considering this into your workflow, shooting with like high contrast scenes in mind. This is more of a special note on Final Cut camera that is coming out. Now the iPad can actually connect up to 4 different iPhones to create a studio setup where you can actually record all the cameras at the same time, and then you'll be able to go and edit that live studio recording after the fact. Now, I think what will make this more usable to a lot of people is having the ability to do live cutting. So while you're looking at the iPad, you can actually pick and it will remember the cameras, as well as being able to broadcast live to Instagram or social media or wherever you're trying to broadcast to. I think that aspect of Final Cut camera is going to be useful to a lot of people who just want to have multiple cameras set up. You just press one button, they all start recording, and then they're imported right into your editor. That's cool. Here are my final thoughts. I'm really going to be giving the iPad M4 a good run for its money in terms of my main editing setup. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I'm looking for lighter setups and also just a nicer screen experience and editing experience. I think iPad for the first time has that opportunity. I'm primarily going to be focusing on DaVinci Resolve as I can go back and forth between my desktop and the iPad through their cloud services, but I think that will really be the benchmark for me to see how well that integrates and how well it actually works. So in the next couple of months, I will be doing a follow-up video to this with my final thoughts on actually its integration into my workflow. That being said, I currently edit everything on my M1 MacBook Pro. I did a quick spec comparison to Canadian pricing, and when I spec'd out the iPad the way that I wanted it with the Apple Pencil and the keyboard, I was at $4,460.10. And when I had the MacBook Pro spec'd out to the way that I wanted it, it was $3,519.95. So that's essentially $940.15 to get the Apple iPad experience. I know for a fact after using this iPad that it will be integrated in some capacity into my workflow. I don't think this is just gonna be like a Netflix and YouTube and admin device. I could really see this being used as a reference monitor for color grading, just a secondary monitor while I'm editing, or my actual full-fledged editing workflow. When we look at companies like Atomos, they just released a brand new product where you can use your iPhone as a monitor with the attachment that they have. I could see this actually happening with the iPad because when you have 1,000 nits and OLED, this is going to be so good for professional use cases as a client monitor for different feedback through Frame.io, as well as potentially your actual own camera monitor when you're filming. I think once we start to see third-party app developers and manufacturers getting their chance to use this and build things around it that make it even better, that's where its real use case and real value is going to really skyrocket. Right now, it looks really good. I'm excited about an iPad for the first time. I've never really been excited about iPads, but genuinely, I think this is the time where I want to explore, would this actually work for me as a video editor and a photo editor? I'm curious what you think of the new Apple iPad, and if you have any questions about it from a video editing perspective, I will be doing deep dives, and I will try to answer as many of those questions in that follow-up video in the next month or two. Peace, guys. Thanks for watching.